In this example, I'll demonstrate how we can get approval of a mix design or a certain material up front with our administrator and then apply it to subsequent checklists as required. And this prevents us having to request approval of that material or mix design for every single checklist. And we'll be using the independent approval process in Civil Pro along with the Standing ITP approval process. Both of these can be found in our help center as well. Let's get into it. So here we have a sub-base placement lot, and I'll navigate to the related items and open the checklist. Here we can see in this hold point line item, proposed job mix design shall not be incorporated into works until deemed suitable by the administrator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move out of this checklist and create an independent approval to approve that mix design, and then I'm going to come back to where we are here and link that approval to this line item. I'll navigate to the approvals. I'll create an independent approval. And here you'll likely just have the independent approval default. I'll send that now to my principal's representative. And so that I can attach a file, I'll click preview. From this approval window here, we will need to give some information here so that the principal representative is aware of what they're approving. So here I'm going to type in mix design sub-base concrete. And I'll add some approval text as well, and this is just some further context. Essentially, we're providing context here as to what they're approving and how this approval will be used. This also shows them that if they approve it here once, it can be linked to checklists thereafter, and they won't have to respond to a hold point every time it's raised from a checklist. So now that we've added the context in here, we'll link the actual mix design. We'll navigate to the related items in the top right and open File Store. Here is where we'll drag and drop our mix design. There we go, I've dropped in my mix design, so that's visible here. Another tip here is if you want that mix design to appear as an attachment in the actual notification email that gets sent to your administrator, you can also click here and say include as attachment. And that means they'll be able to very quickly glance at that mix design before jumping back into Civil Pro and approving this independent approval. So I'll add that in here. And now that is ready to go. So I'll click Start Workflow Send, and that has been sent. And we can see that mix design here, the status is submitted for approval. I'll now jump into the view that the administrator receives. Here we can see what the administrator will receive in their email notifications. You might have a slight variation on this based on your notification defaults, but here is that detail. Here is the link they'll click to jump back into the approval, and down the bottom are the attachments that we added when we created this independent approval. But in short, they'll click on this hyperlink and they'll be taken back into Civil Pro. Once they've clicked that link, this is the view that they'll have. We can see that context here, the subject, it was submitted for approval by the administrator. And if your administrator will navigate to the related items, they can click on that item and review that they're happy with their mix design. Be sure to add sufficient context into the approval here so that they can assess whether that mix design is suitable or not. After they're happy, all they do is click Action Step, Approved. I'll now jump back into the Engineer's view. Back in the Engineer's view, we can see that approval up the top here. We can see that it has now been approved. So that approval from the principal's rep has now been captured against that mix design. So now we can navigate back to that checklist and link this approval to that line item. Here we can see that lot is still selected, and we can jump into the checklist. Here is that line item here. If I select that line item and raise the related items, I can then navigate to the approvals and select that approved mix design from the approvals register and click Save. If you have a whole lot of things in this register, it's hard to find what you're after. You can either show filter row, which allows you to then just type in mix design, for example, and it'll filter, or you can apply a filter to the category, for example, and just show independent. Now that I've got that, I will click Save. Now it's important to note at this stage that hold point hasn't been released. All that's happened is the contractor has indicated that that approval that has been approved by the administrator is relevant to this hold point. So what we need to do is we need to now release this hold point ourselves with reference to that approval, because we're confident that this has been approved for this line item. Here we click Set Manual Approval. Now it's important to add context there where we link, albeit through writing, the approval number 124. Now that we've linked that approval, we can check that that will be included in the completed checklist by printing out that checklist here. And we can see that whole point, albeit released by us, has got a link to that approval, which shows that it has been approved. And here are those comments that I have added in here as well. So that closes the loop. It is important to make sure that the mix design is relevant here. You don't want to just be attaching any mix design that is within your approvals register, because ultimately this will be printed out. Your name will be against that standing approval, and the approval and the contents of that approval will be printed out in the lot summary report. So ultimately it will come out in the wash if the incorrect approval or incorrect mix design in this example has been applied to this line item. But that's how we can manage things using an independent approval. At this stage, we've got a decision to make. We can continue to create checklists and attach that independent approval as we've just gone through. Or what we can do is we can attach that independent approval to the master ITP template. And then whenever this checklist is deployed to subsequent lots, the approval will appear in the related items and make it readily accessible to be linked to this line item. So I'll show you how we can create a linkage between this line item and that independent approval in the master ITP. We'll navigate to the ITP register, find the lean mix ITP. Here is that line item here. On the right hand side of the screen, we'll go to related items and click this hyperlink here by the standing approvals. This will bring up the approvals register, and here we can see that approved mix design independent approval that we created earlier. So I'll click that and I'll click save. And what that's done now is it has linked that independent approval to this line item. It won't automatically release the hold point when this is deployed as a checklist from now on, but at least it'll be there to quickly reference. And I'll show you what that looks like now. So from the lot register, I'll select the next lot. We can see there isn't a checklist here at the moment. So I'll add that lean mix checklist. Here it is. So now we've added that checklist. We'll confirm that we've verified the first item. With the second item, if I select it, and this is the one that we've previously had an approval for, I can now see that there is this related approval there, sitting ready for quick reference. So as opposed to clicking related, navigating to the approvals register and finding that independent approval, we've already created that linkage here. So all I need to do now is verify and set manual approval. Cool. And now that has been approved, and the comment that we added refers them back to 124, and this approval 124 and the contents of that will now be printed in that lot summary report. So that's how we use the standing ITP approval on the back of an independent approval.